Welcome to Scorched Earth and a general reading for the sign of Aries, Sun, Moon or Ascendant for the month of July 2025. I hope you are well. I'm using the Night Sun Tarot for you today. It's actually been coming out for every single sign this month so far. Anywho, if the reading resonates with you and you would like to go a little bit deeper, there is an extended that you can access at the end. That's via a link in the description box below. You're looking for the link that takes you to Selfie. Or alternatively, you can come join us over on Circle. There you can get access to all of the extended content for no extra cost beyond the membership fee, which includes not just all the monthly readings for all of the signs, but weekly energy readings, and we run classes over there too, live classes, which you can come participate in. So if that sounds like it might be of interest to you, you know what to do with those links below. Anywho, Aries, let's flip things around and see what's going on with you. Can I have 3 cards for Aries, please? There we go. We have the first card. It is the 9 of Cups. This is recent past. What about current energy, please, for Aries? Oof. 7 of Cups on its side. And what's coming towards Aries, please, for July? What do we need to know for July for Aries? Interesting. Now, you might have noticed this card slipped out to the side. I have to tell you, I have the most insane goosebumps. I don't know if the camera is going to pick it up, but all my hairs are standing on end. I don't usually take cards when they fall to the right, but because that one kind of slid out and it felt like it was kind of pointed, I'm just going to put it there for a second, and it's going to sit behind whatever is actually coming out for July, and we'll go again, because I think whatever it is, the presence of the Justice card is saying that this is a big karmic hoo-ha. Well, let's put it that way. Alignment, possibly. Balance, definitely. But a sense of being kind of pulled towards something that feels destined is very, very strong. So what's coming towards Aries, please, for July? What does Aries need to know? There we go. Right. Oh my fucking god, no wonder my fucking goosebumps are going insane. I wish you could see it, but it looks like it's coming out over my entire body, because the card that we have at the bottom of the deck is the Wheel of Fortune. I will remind you that these goosebumps started before these 3 cards showed their faces. And let me explain to you why I think that that is significant. When you've read cards for a while, right, obviously you have the individual meanings of the cards, but there is a certain synthesis of certain sets of cards that come to mean something very specific to you, right? That's the nature of tarot, because tarot doesn't happen here, it happens in here. So patterns that you see and that you associate with stuff, you can group clumps of cards together that might ordinarily on their own not necessarily refer to the same thing for someone else, for example. So in your case here, just check, it's this deck that wants to come up. I have 3 cards that indicate massive shifts, and they are usually massive shifts that are A, life-changing, and B, totally redirect you towards something that feels very destined, right? I don't like so much the idea of fate, because I think it robs us of a certain amount of sovereignty or autonomy. But there's something a little bit more that just feels a bit more right for me when we talk about aligning with destiny, right? Those 3 cards are the Judgment card, the Justice card, and the Wheel of Fortune. Any 2 of that 3 in the trifecta showing up together is an indication to me that something fairly significant is bubbling. When all 3 turn up, it is undoubtable and unmistakable. So now that's out of the way, hopefully the goosebumps will stop. I have to tell you that when I did the June readings, it was very, very clear to me that there were huge consciousness shifts happening. There was one exception to that, and it was Leo, and it makes perfect sense as to why Leo would be struggling at this time. I'll not go into this now because it's your sister fire sign, but this ain't their reading, right? Right across the board for everybody else, it was clear that there was some sort of monumental shift in consciousness that was going on in June, and certainly a monumental shift in perceptions of things as well. And to all intents and purposes, this seemed like a very subtle thing, as shifts in consciousness actually generally are. But for the last few months, and it's been getting stronger as we got closer to July, I have felt like July was a massive fucking tipping point, in so much as everything that's occurred in the previous 6 months, and maybe we can even, go back further than that and start looking at, kind of from September last year, where Mars entered Leo and then stationed retrograde, and then started retrograding back through Leo and then through Cancer, and then eventually stopping in Cancer and coming back and retracing all of its steps. Like, it's your ruling planet, let's not forget. Everything's been a bit surreal, everything's been a bit weird, and I've been sort of banging the drum of be very guarded about where your attention is, don't let it be farmed away from you, all this sort of thing. But like, the last 6 months have been very, very strange indeed, I think. And I think I've never perceived a time, not even during the debacle of 2020 and whatnot, where people seemed so inward facing. I would say, more aware people were more inward facing. And just kind of, I don't know, almost confused and lost. And so then, taking charge of your own attention and chopping wood and carrying water, which has been a message actually for a lot of the fire sign, specifically Sagittarius, right? But it's come up a lot with Aries as well. Taking our time, doing things slowly, all this sort of thing. It's been really, really important. It's been an anchor point. It's been grounding. Now, all of this to say, I feel like the previous 6 months and everything that has occurred in the last 6 months, particularly when we're talking about those very subtle and very nuanced internal shifts that have been happening, have been leading to a point where there will be an outward expression of that at some point, right? And I feel like July is something to do with that, right? It's certainly a sense that things start to pick up a pace. And we perceive a picking up of the pace. I said at the beginning of the year, it felt like a little bit like events would fly past us, and we'd just be here going like, what the fuck is going on? I don't really know what's going on. And I feel like that's been borne out by the events of 2025 thus far. But I think there's a catching up point that's coming in, and those who have been doing their work, those who have always just kind of like breathed their way through this shift in consciousness, accepting it for what it is, but also, keeping an eye on the things that are important, such as yourself, Aries. And you've been top of the class on this one all year, I have to say, or maybe sharing it with a couple of other signs, right? But you've been a notable representation of a good expression of this energy. There's a peeling away here. There's a peeling away from a previous trajectory, right? And it doesn't feel tower-like, oh, you can't go that way, it's all shut down, it's, or even kind of Saturn-like. It isn't like that, but it feels more kind of like all the work that you've done is allowing you to peel away in a direction that feels much more fulfilling, perhaps, but has much more energy with it. Now, Saturn is in your sign at the moment, and it is conjunct Neptune at the moment, and that's kind of significant. Jupiter has just moved into Cancer, and there's some friction, there's some challenges, there's some movement that's going to need to happen for these two big planets to resolve what tension they are experiencing at the moment, and Neptune's just kind of fogging everything up here. But I do wonder if, because Saturn is in your sign, and because Neptune is in your sign, and because there is so much energy in the sign of Aries, and that's been happening all year, all this 0 point energy that we've been talking about, running over 0 point of Aries again and again and again, it's been building up the tank so that there is a bigger movement that can happen. And if this looks like a month where that big movement's happening, and you've been so patient, Aries. You have developed a level of patience that, frankly, I find absolutely astounding, knowing the archetype of your sign, right? It's not really how you are built, but at the same time, every single sign is having to lean into maybe even to some extent their opposite, right? Learn the lessons of their opposite. I think Libra can be extraordinarily patient with things, right? We're talking about balance, right? But almost to a fault. They don't want to disrupt the balance, whereas Aries is quite happy to do so. With you, you've been building this internal balance that is so fucking strong now. Like I said, it feels like, rather than just sort of popping off like Aries can do, right? And does quite often do. There is, it's almost like you've installed a bigger tank, right? And you've been filling that tank very quietly, steadily, slowly, consistently over the last 6 months. And now it's full. And now some of that energy can start being discharged in a way that feels much more of the way of Aries than you've been able to do for the last 6 months. But at the same time, it's kind of tempered by this shift that has occurred in your consciousness over the last 6 months, right? So it's much more emperor-like than it is, fireworks going off in 15 different directions. Anyway, let's get some clarifiers out here, because I want to get into the meat of this, but I just want to really, really drill home to you. Everything that's happened in the last 6 months has been much more significant than you realise. And I think maybe it is only in retrospect you will see, maybe you might be quite impressed with the level of wisdom that you have exhibited and accrued over this time, and how it allowed you to peel away from whatever the events of July are, to strike out in a new way. Or strike out in the way that perhaps you've been planning for a long time, I don't know, but with more energy, more stamina, definitely more in the tank. Tell me about the Nine of Cups, please. Why is this here for Aries? Right, we have the Moon. It's a card of Cancer. That's interesting because we have Jupiter in Cancer there. I mean, the card itself is Jupiter in Pisces, right? But we've got Jupiter and we've got Cancer. We got the Nine of Cups. What do you have here? Right. Page of Cups and the Two of Wands on its side. Tell me about the Seven of Cups, please. Fucking hell, cards flying out everywhere. Four of Cups, Nine of Cups, Four of Swords. Tell me about Judgment and Justice. Right, we have the Three of Pentacles. We have the Six of Cups and the Ten of Swords. I almost kind of want to put those there like that. Yeah, I knew whatever was going to come out the right way up. I'm getting goosebumps again, Aries. We have the Page of Pentacles at the bottom of the deck. Right, so there is quite a lot going on here. Fuck. I wouldn't mind, right? But it's not like I just get goosebumps on my arms. They start from my ankles and they roll right up my body, down my arms, and then over the crown of my head as well. Which is just... I'm autistic and I've got ADHD, right? But that kind of like sensory overload freaks me out. Anywho. There's quite a lot going on here, or rather there has been quite a lot going on here for you, and the majority of it really being beneath the surface. I would say it's been much more about assimilation, a very quiet, very subtle, very nuanced assimilation, than kind of being battered around by the energies of the cosmos. We start over here with the Nine of Cups. Now for me, traditionally when I talk about this card, we can look at it from several different perspectives, and one of those is that for me the nines represent the management, active or otherwise, of whatever suit they represent, right? So it's kind of internal, but it's about the individual, right? So in the case of the Nine of Swords, it would be, how do you manage your mind, or does your mind manage you? Think about it as a kind of step up from the Eight of Swords there, right? We're stuck, we're trapped, we're in a rigid space, and now we feel nothing but like kind of existential pain because we're so anxious we can't work shit out, right? In the case of the Nine of Cups, it's about how you manage your emotions. Now, that traditionally has been something that is quite difficult for you, Aries, and it's not because you're a terrible person. It's because there's a certain path that Aries picks, I think, which is going to give them the skills that they need to, move on, evolve, ascend, whatever you want to say, right? So it's always going to be around challenging reactivity with Aries, right? For example, you're probably less likely to find a Capricorn who is having challenges about, regulating their responses to people, because they tend to do things slowly and they tend to actually just ignore stuff that makes them internally reactive. They're quite private, they don't show stuff, So it makes sense that a sign like Aries would be getting lessons that revolved around that, right? Great in a crisis, but when the crisis is internal, like, how do you regulate yourself? That has been, I think that's been coming up quite a lot over the last few years for you, right? So we've got essentially here a representation of what has been achieved by Aries in terms of beginning the process of regulating that emotion that was highly reactive before. Aries is designed to pop off pretty quickly on things, but you tend to simmer down pretty quickly too. And there are good points about that and there are bad points about that. And when the good points are, if you get angry, you don't tend to stay angry for very long, right? You tend to simmer down really quite quickly. But there are issues of attention as well, right? The Aries will start with a bang and end with a fizzle sometimes. But because a lot of the ways in which you have been exhausting yourself in the last few years could be directly linked to that emotional reactivity, mastery of that internally leads to a much more balanced place where you can actually look at what is in front of you and decide whether it's worth reacting to. Right? Introduce some element of introduce a space between an action and a reaction. And I think we've talked a lot about how a lot of Aries energy was based on that reactivity principle rather than being proactive, which is really what the highest expression of Aries energy is, right? So we've got a position that you've arrived at where you are now far better emotionally regulated than you ever have been before. And then we move into the second meaning of the card, which is talking about your highest hopes, goals, dreams, and aspirations. Now, I use that same phrase when I'm talking about the star, but what differentiates the two of them is the star is kind of like a guiding principle. It's up there, it's something that we're striving towards. I want to be touching that star as much as possible. And if we can't touch the star, we're going to at least follow it, right? So you're following your heart, you're following your connection to whatever it is that's twinkling at you in the sky, and you're going that way. The Nine of Cups differs for me in that space because it's minor arcana, which means it's what you have within your control. So just as it was within your control to learn to emotionally regulate, it is also within your control to be able to put yourself on a path towards what it is that you actually want, right? The highest expression of fulfillment in your life is within your hands. And if you can keep everything, keep your priorities right, keep your emotions in check, make sure that you are being totally fucking present all the time and not just, this, then you can work steadily towards what is the highest expression of your happiness. Now, I honestly think in the last few years, Aries just didn't have time. Now, I think that was building for a long time, actually. There was no point where it was available to you to just decide what you wanted and do that. Which is really what Aries should be doing all the time, right? You're notoriously headstrong, but notoriously powerful in throwing yourself after something that you want. I think in some ways Aries is one of the most powerful signs in the zodiac on account of your ability to be able to create something out of nothing. It takes a phenomenal amount of energy to do that. But because for the last few years what you have been doing is spinning plates, taking on way too much in terms of responsibility and whatnot. Kind of picking up the slack when you could see that other people weren't going to do that. And these were admirable things, but ultimately they were things that exhausted you. You've created space enough to be able to contemplate what it is that is really meaningful for you, and how it is that you will walk the path towards that, right? And enjoy the path itself, not just the destination, but the journey, right? Now, there are other things that have emerged during that time, which is a considerably improved relationship with self. I was actually just musing on this morning, on where motivation comes from, because it's something I'm kind of rolling around in my own life at the moment as well. And I actually can't tell you what I decided about that while I was just musing, because I've completely fucking forgotten. Right, but it would be something along the lines of how you motivate yourself from a place that isn't guilt or shame or a sense of I have to do it because nobody else is doing it, but rather a place of, this feels really good and I want to do this. I want to do more of this. I want my life to be filled with this. I mean, for me, that is emotional fulfillment. It's almost like a self-perpetuating thing. But because you've cared enough about yourself, you've improved your relationship with yourself, you're now in a position where you can actually contemplate those things without feeling guilt or shame that you should be doing something else. Now, when we come down here, we've got the Moon card, and I actually really like the fact that the Moon card is here supporting this Nine of Cups, because what I'm not seeing now is any state of conflict, exactly of the order that I was just talking about there, right, where everybody else's needs superseded your own, such that you would begin to deny essentially your own essential nature, which is to be first and just exploring and adventuring and all this kind of thing. There's been a dare I say, a kind of humdrum sort of, life hasn't had the excitement that you need, right? But to some extent our external world will reflect our internal world. And I think when everything about your external world was wrong and unsupporting of what your conscious goals were, I think it's safe to say that that's the same thing that was going on in your subconscious mind. Because if everybody else's needs supersede your own, you're probably not doing the right thing. If you are doing it because you love it and it fills you with joy to do it, if you are serving other people because it brings you joy to serve, that's something else entirely. Don't think it's where you were. But the Moon card is saying to me that there is now an alignment between what's going on in your subconscious and actually what you are consciously striving towards. There's no kickback, there's no conflict, there's no I have to deny my own essential nature to be able to deal with all of the things that are in my life and demanding my attention. That is incredibly fucking powerful. And we've got the Page of Cups there and the Two of Wands, and I like this because it sort of gives this idea of a kind of patience that you have with yourself now. We've talked before about how fire signs are particularly predisposed to feel like if they are not actively doing something, building something, burning something down, right, building up a sweat, heart beating fast, that they almost don't exist. It's like, what's the fucking point of you? You're not doing a thing, right? Aries suffers with that, Leo suffers with that, Sagittarius suffers with that. Like, we are signs that are designed to move. And even though there hasn't really been much in the way of movement this year, there's been tremendous movement inside because you've been patient enough with yourself to allow it to happen, right? The Two of Wands is a crossroads moment. That's often how we talk about it. It's actually an Aries card there. And it's that point where we start to try and think through the consequences of taking one path over another, right? We're not actually in the process of moving yet, but it's the precursor to the movement that will occur in the Three of Wands. And we've got the Page of Cups, which is the first step on some sort of emotional journey, right? Or it indicates an energy that's kind of molding and shaping our emotions to go in a different way. Either way, what I'm feeling is no sense of rush for you to be overthinking what your next steps are, right? There's a feeling here, and it's the fact that these cards are sideways that is giving me that feeling of patience. Because it's not like, oh, I need to pick, or I'm stuck in a state where I feel like I don't have any choices and I have to go this way. It's like, there's a whole fucking calm ass vibe about you here, Aries. You're not going to be rushed into anything. Neither are you going to rush yourself into anything. There is this feeling that is constantly bubbling away with you. That is, I'm willing to let things unfold because I trust that I know when decisions need to be made, I'll be there and I'll be ready to make them. Right? There's no fear of ambush, which would have been very understandable given the events of, what I say, 22, 23. Like, there was a lot going on there for you, and a lot of that highly destabilizing, and most of it stuff you didn't see coming, right? It was just hit again and again and again, and you're like, I don't have anything else to lose. And then the tower hits again and you went, wow. Like, didn't see in a million years that being the thing that was going on, right? And then there's been the long, slow, steady road to recovery, which you have knuckled down and adhered to. And the benefit of that is that you are now emotionally regulated. You are not emotionally reactive. And most specifically, you're not self-flagellating anymore. You're not whipping yourself into a fervor that you need to be doing something. Everything feels very calm. Now, what's really interesting in your current energy is this idea that you still actually don't quite know what's going on, right? I mean, join the fucking club. You're definitely not on your own on that one there, right? The Seven of Cups here indicates an energy that can be highly illusory, particularly in the arena of how we feel about stuff, right? So there's a kind of deceptive energy to it, and it's very Neptune, right? So we tend to be looking at things along the line of distortion more than anything else, right? And it's like, have I just thrown myself into the water here? Am I about to sink or am I floating? I don't actually know. The Seven of Cups for me is about absolute crystal clear clarity. And we can't say, in all honesty, that we have that. But things aren't foggy either. And this is why I feel like what we've been talking about for the last 27 minutes is actually about the way that your consciousness has shifted. Now, it's going to take time for you to kind of bed into what that means and what that looks like, because it's very novel, it's very new. And I think the novelty is part of what you're enjoying about this. So the shift in consciousness that I'm seeing here is not, oh my God, I'm confused, or, oh my God, I've got the answer, it's fantastic. It's, I am actually kind of comfortable with not really knowing either way, which is not very traditional Aries, but we're not in traditional times and consciousness is shifting, right? So we've got the Four of Cups, the Nine of Cups, and the Four of Swords here. And this is very interesting because Fours are always about foundation. The we think about the shape of a square, right? Four-sided shape. It's solid, right? What we build on top of that, hopefully, will the foundations will support that moving forward. And I think it's very, very clear to you that previous foundations were built on the Four of Cups, right? It was a fear of rejection. It was a fear of feeling like you were rejecting others. Maybe there was some guilt in there. Maybe there was some shame in there. Almost certainly there were abandonment issues in there, right? And everything that you built thereafter was built on that. Now, through the power of the Nine of Cups, through the work that you have done to become more comfortable in your own skin, emotionally speaking at least, we come to this place where there's a peace. The Four of Swords is a card that speaks of many things. So it follows on from the Three of Swords. So we have the idea that it represents a period of healing. right? It talks about taking a break, taking a step back, and when we are hurt, we do tend to withdraw, right? We need to give ourselves time to adjust to the new parameters of reality that the Three of Swords has revealed to us, right? We didn't like it; it speared us right through the heart, but it is what it is, and the truth doesn't change. Whether we like it or not, I guess. So the Four of Swords is this act of healing and this accepting state. I mean, it's a card for me of meditation as well. I wouldn't be surprised to find out that some Aries have got really quite serious about meditation and are beginning to feel the benefits that that kind of thing can bring. But ultimately, it is a peace. I mean, when your nervous system is not up a height all the time, and you're not pinging violently between overthinking and feeling like a fucking schmuck, and then flagellating yourself, kind of whipping yourself into a frenzy to get more things done because people need you to get things done, and you need to make sure that these things are done for people, right? You've been in this kind of peaceful space where you're like, what is this? To be alive in this way, I don't recognize it, but I really fucking like it. It feels like you've replaced your foundation. And I have felt like 2025 was a lot like that. Like, in some ways, there was a tabula rasa. There was a blank slate whereby we get to almost start again in some sort of way. But we start again from kind of the point where we would hope that we would have arrived. That pure version of us that isn't rocking any wounding, that isn't doing any of these things, but actually can apply our will in a very healed and very wise way to all the situations that we have in front of us. And instead, what we've spent is decades kind of wrestling with the issues that were incurred during our youth. But now we have all of the wisdom that comes from having lived those years in that way, then working through it, then healing it, and being like, well, the world's just about to reinvent itself entirely, and I've got a second chance at engaging with that in a meaningful way. And oh my goodness, Aries, this is what is happening in July. So we have the Judgment card, we have the Justice card. I've already explained to you why that's significant, along with the Wheel of Fortune at the bottom of the deck here. I haven't really mentioned the Page of Pentacles up until this point, and maybe I should. The Page of Pentacles has an initiatory quality, right? All the pages do. We've already seen the Page of Cups over here, right? Just going to shove those out of the way. And you might ask how it is that it differs from the Aces. And I think you would be right to ask that question, because they both deal with similar sort of concepts. But in the case of the Aces, what we have is something that is so novel it hasn't really been experienced yet. Whereas the pages for me indicate the beginning of a journey where we learn to utilize these things, right? So we're obviously moving from page up to king. The pages for me take something that we already have. So in the case of the Page of Cups over here, right, it's the level of willingness that you have to emotionally engage with yourself and listen in a compassionate way to what comes back from yourself. Here in the case of the Page of Pentacles, we're talking about value and we're talking about investment. Because the Pentacles for me are simply that which you are capable of investing, and we invest in them because we perceive them to have value, right? So a Pentacle can represent your time, your care, your effort, your money, your love, your attention. And it seems to me like you're taking all of these things that you are capable of investing and you are pushing them in a new direction, right? We're not going straight into emperor level. We're not talking about overnight celebrity or something like that, but we could certainly be talking about you being adjusted to a path where a great deal of recognition is possible. Now, not all Aries are looking for that, and that's fine. It's just one way that this could show up. The point is, it's a starting place, and I feel like the Page of Pentacles is so much more powerful here, in terms of the story that is playing out in your life than the Ace of Pentacles would be, because the Page is nodding to the fact that you have been building up your tank for the last 6 months, probably actually longer, but definitely for the last 6 months, and we're getting ready to come to a place of investment in that, right? It's getting discharged, it's coming out somewhere. Now, these 3 cards along here are really quite interesting, and because we could have, as I suggested over here with those cards that came out sideways, like energies that were present but not needing to be on or off all the time, right? They're just there, but they're not engaged, but they are there, and that's the important thing, right? So you can utilize them if you need them. With these cards here, there's a question of whether they are alternatively in the process of shifting, right? So, for example, perhaps where you are used to traditionally bearing the load all by yourself, as we would see with the 3 of Pentacles and the 6 of Cups, like traditionally in the past, it has always been true that people don't fucking work with you. They don't. They talk the talk, but when it comes to the actual action that supports that, it's not a cooperative process. It's not a collaborative process. Somebody is always, doing the overwhelming majority of the work, and invariably it would end up being you. What we could be seeing is something that is shifting away from that being the dominant, the dominant mindset. The Ten of Swords is really significant here, and actually a very, very welcome card. I know a lot of people don't like it. It's quite visually jarring. It's understandable why people wouldn't like it, right? And particularly because it represents the pinnacle of the suit of swords, which is the most difficult suit to work through, I think it is, because we are always in this state of challenging our own mental processes with the thing that creates the mental processes, right? It's a difficult thing to do. But when the Ten of Swords shows up, it's welcome for me because it represents an end to a kind of internal suffering that we have inflicted on ourselves. And I'll be careful, I don't want people to flinch about, oh, I did this to myself. To some extent, we sort of did, but we sort of didn't, right? But the things that happen to us early in our life are not our fault, but as we become adults, it becomes our responsibility to deal with those. And I think the biggest problem is, it was interesting, it was something my mother used to say. She was like a stopped clock, right? She was right twice a day, and the rest of everything that she came out with was like, all right, Mum. She said the biggest disappointment of her adult life was realising that adults were simply just children in adult bodies. And as I got older, I discovered also exactly the same thing here. Why did I tell you that? Can't remember what the thought process was that was leading to that. Just as the Ten of Wands sometimes talks to me about how we make life difficult for ourselves by the things that we choose to do, the things that we choose to take on, even though when we're looking at it logically, like, why the fuck is anybody trying to carry 10 wands like that? That's just stupid. Why do you need so many? Why did you have to carry them all in one go, right? These sorts of questions. The Ten of Swords for me represents a state of recognition of where our mindset has facilitated the ways that we have struggled and the ways that we have suffered. So you see here, although this man is run through with swords, and the swords are, the mental processing of the experience that we've had, he's actually turning his eyes towards the rapidly approaching dawn. It is always darkest before the dawn, right? So this Ten of Swords, as the Ten of Wands does for me, they represent a point of relief, where it's like, it's done. A cycle of thinking, a cycle of a particular set of mental processes is coming to an end, and it's evolving into something new. And there's a great deal of relief with that. I think for you, possibly the breakthrough moment here is realising that you're not doing it all on your own. Now, that doesn't mean everybody else is doing it for you. It means, to me, I think, Aries, that for the first time you're really, truly understanding that not the value of cooperation, but maybe the value of cooperation, where your dominant mindset is not, well, this is all very good now, but at some point I'm going to be the one who ends up doing all of the work, right? And then that colouring your mental processes from now on. Because you have good boundaries and you do make the effort to articulate how you feel about things, like you manage expectations ahead of time. You know, all of these things that you have been working on for years, it feels like they're coming together this month in a way that is really meaningful, because we've got the Chariot. And the Chariot talks about a number of things. It talks about victory and it talks about success. It talks about not necessarily achieving those, but having everything in place so that it's far more likely than it's not that these things are going to happen, right? But the Chariot has a very, very deep meaning when it comes to an understanding of self, right? The process of individuation and maturation. Because what we're doing is we're taking our polarities and we are not excising any bit of it that we don't like. There's a full embrace of self going on here, and a full embrace of that which is polarized within us. So, you know, good, bad, and night and day, positive and negative, as in charge, you know, right? An understanding of the duality of everything, and how the place that is best built for success is that point in the middle. And we've had this kind of ricocheting through the reading all the way along, like your own internal personal balance, your personal alignment is the thing that is going to guarantee your success, right? Now, I think a big part of this month for you is realising that there are people out there who want to, in some way or another, work with you. Now, I'm not saying this is necessarily directly related to themes of work or things like that, but it could be, you know, people who want to romantically work with you, right? Relationships are work. There's no fucking Disney quality to what relationships actually are. It's not love at first sight, or we went through a bit of difficulty to get together, but now we're here and it's a happily ever after. I mean, I actually call that the Disney effect, and my sister suffered from that really, really badly. She loved Disney films when she was a kid, and she spent her entire life looking for that Disney fucking moment, which never fucking happened, right? And then as she got older, she kind of worked that out, and now is in a very good relationship. But the point is, relationships take work. So you are working together with someone on that one. But it could be something else as well. It could be creative process. At this point, it could be literally anything. So you take it as it resonates to you. But what I see here for you is balance. Exactly the right balance between the I and the we. Exactly the right balance between all the bits of you that have been out of balance for the longest time. I see the beginnings of the execution of a plan, and I feel like the universe is kind of coming in and assisting with that, right? There's an awful lot of energy contained within these three cards here, you know. And the Judgment card is often shows up when we have some sort of life-changing decision to make. Now, the Justice card and the Wheel of Fortune say that this is always a decision that was going to be placed in front of you, asking you to align with it or not, right? Because free will is a thing. I believe it's a thing. I believe it exists. But your destiny's tweaking at you, Aries, and it's saying, hello, I'm here. Are you ready? Are you ready to trust that this is for you? Are you ready to put the work into whatever this is? And are you willing to trust that there are people out there who will work with you on whatever it is? Do you trust, in fact, and have faith in the universe that it too is a generative force that wants to help you achieve what you're here to do? Like, let's put one more card on here. So there's the Six of Cups again. Ooh, goosebumps. It's not a test. I want to be very, very clear about that. It's not a test. It's the point where you see how far you've come. It's the point where you see how far you got in your own way in the past. And it wasn't because people weren't helpful, although that, was part of it. It was because you were working to a version of reality that saw you isolated. And over time you came to prefer that isolation because it was less tricky than dealing with people and dealing with the possibility of rejection or being hurt or any of these things, which it wounds me a little bit when I see strong signs who are just kind of put on again and again and again, because I know the attitude that goes with it is, oh, it's all right, Aries will take care of it, or it's all right, Leo will take care of it, And nobody stops to ask if you're all right. But then even if they did stop to ask if you were all right, you go, yeah, of course, what are you talking about? We're our own worst enemies in that regard because we don't know how to not be isolated. We don't know how to express vulnerability. I should say we didn't, right? We didn't know how to be part of a cooperative, collaborative process because we were never shown. This huge leap forwards in consciousness has taken you from a place which in retrospect you will see is riddled with Six of Cups, Nine of Swords, Three of Pentacles reversed energy, and replacing it with something else. I mean, the Tower is adding an enormous fucking power boost to what is already a powerful fucking month for you. It represents the sign of Mars. The planet Mars. Are you ready to start catapulting towards your destiny? It's not a test. It's like, hey Aries, are you ready to start again? Because the universe thinks you are ready. It's time. And so much of what comes up this month is just going to affirm what it is that you've been feeling right the way along the line. You don't need to fear the Tower. I don't feel like the Tower's a bad thing here. I'm even looking at these cards here and I'm like, yeah, this is fucking mint, this. Because this isn't what is in front of you. This is what you've travailed through. This is a statement of your strength. You've been put through the ringer so fucking hard in the last few years. It's not much that can come along that was going to scare you. And now these energies are dealt with. Now you understand the Tower and why I always say it's a good thing. Long term, it's a good thing. It doesn't necessarily feel like it in the moment. You're ready to start making very, very powerful moves forwards, and the universe is here to support you do exactly that. More than that, I think there are people here to support you doing exactly that. Are you ready to start being a force out in the universe, Aries? Because the events of this month, that's where they're taking you. Right, fuck me, I've been prattling on for ages. I'm going to go now. I'm going to go to the extended. If you would like to join me over there, you're very welcome to do so. You can do that on Selfie, you can do that on Circle. I'd be delighted to see you in either place. If that's not your bag, that's absolutely fine. But just get ready, because I feel like there are so many things that are going to be flashing up this month. Opportunities, funny conversations that just lead to this thing, to this thing, to this thing. That it's almost like if you were a little lacking or less having a faith than you do right now, that you might side-eye it and not necessarily trust it, but I think you can trust it. And I think that it's time to start emptying that tank at whatever shows up this month, in the best possible way, of course. So, know that I love you all very, very much. I'll see you soon.